A chill, salt-sprayed wind whips across the blacked-out decks of 1940s cinema, carrying tales of barnacle-covered coffins, vanishing crews, and beasts that rise only when the moonlight refracts through green seawater. These 15 forgotten seafaring horror adventures let wartime audiences escape the surface only to drown in dread beneath it. Each reel is an anchor chain, rusted, rattling, impossible to break, hauling us into depths where logic suffocates and legend breathes. Brace yourself. By the time you claw back to daylight, you'll swear something slimy brushed your ankle. Number 1. The Seawolf, 1941. Imagine boarding a battered steamship only to discover the ocean is not the cruelest thing out there. The captain is. Michael Curtis's searing take on Jack London's novel turns Edward G. Robinson's Wolf Larsen into a two-legged maelstrom. He stalks his deck like a leviathan in human skin, crushing mutiny with a glance. The Ghost, his scavenging schooner, groans beneath rusted chains and the weight of crewmen who dare not sleep. When a shipwrecked critic and a runaway poet are yanked aboard, the film traps us beside them in dripping iron corridors where every clang of the boiler suggests the timbers themselves are deciding whose morality will break next. Curtis shoots through rigging that cuts faces into fragments so we feel the men slowly losing pieces of themselves. Wartime viewers, already scanning headlines for U-boats, felt the abyss of authoritarian control opening beneath their own feet. By the time the Ghost smashes against reef-tipped rocks, you're left wondering which is worse, a watery grave or surviving long enough to become the monster you feared. And if you think a tyrant on an open deck is terrifying, wait until treasure fever drives strangers into the mouth of a fog-shrouded island. Number 2. Horror Island, 1941. The scheme sounds harmless. Rent a tramp schooner, sail to an uncharted speck in the Gulf, and hunt for pirate gold. George Wagner's Horror Island turns that daydream into a damp-palmed nightmare. Fast-talking promoter Bill Martin invites a carnival of misfits, socialites, sideshow sharpshooters, a jaded reporter, hawking visions of romance beneath waving palms. Instead, the party drifts into a pea-soup fog that muffles gunshots and smells of mildew-soaked gunpowder. An abandoned Spanish fortress rises from mangrove roots like the spine of a drowned titan, and an unseen figure in rain slicker and slouch hat starts picking guests off one by one. Wagner mixes pulpy thrills with genuine dread. Walls sweat, torches sputter, and the distant surf beats like a heart you can never outrun. Wartime audiences, ration books in their pockets, read the film as a parable of greed, blinding people to invisible dangers. The finale leaves the treasure glinting out of reach, and viewers realizing the island itself may have been luring ships to wreck for centuries. Somewhere beyond that crumbling parapet waits a vessel whose corridors echo with footsteps no one can trace. Number 3. The Ghost Ship, 1943. Producer Val Lewton and director Mark Robson strip away every cheap scare until only pure dread remains. The Altair is spotless, too spotless, her ropes coiled in eerie perfection, her corridors quiet enough to hear your own pulse. Junior Officer Tom Merriam arrives eager to serve Captain Will Stone until Stone's calm slips into cold omniscience. He can predict gale patterns and the silent thoughts of his crew with equal certainty. Accidents begin, a cable snaps, a chain locker seals shut, a cadet's body drifts astern like an unblinking compass. No specter ever materializes, yet you feel it breathing behind every rivet. The foghorn howls like something ancient and hungry, while the sea around her lies flat as if nature itself fears disturbing what stalks the decks. Audiences in 1943, morning suns lost to Atlantic convoys, whispered that the picture captured the war's most secret terror, dying where no rescue can come. The courtroom climax offers legal closure, but Luton's last shot, an empty bridge, the wheel still turning, implies the Altair sails on, crewed only by legend. But how do you scream for help when your next ship has no walls at all? Number 4. Lifeboat, 1944. Alfred Hitchcock dispenses with corridors altogether and locks his viewers on open water. After a merchant vessel and a U-boat annihilate each other, 9 survivors claw into a single lifeboat that's already leaking. They bring prejudices and private agendas aboard like barnacles, but true horror blooms when they haul a half-drowned German officer over the gunwale. Willie claims to be a steward. The pristine compass hidden in his pocket says otherwise. Sun blisters skin, salt sores weep, and rations dwindle until even a corpse's diamond bracelet is gnawed for sugar. Hitchcock's drifting camera turns the craft into a floating coffin, proving terror needs no shadows, only the suspicion that the person beside you is plotting your end. Wartime moviegoers gasped when Willie's sabotage surfaced, yet the moment that froze hearts was simpler. A lullaby hummed to a dying baby against horizons as empty as eternity. Rescue feels less like salvation than parole because the film leaves one shivering question bobbing astern. Did we drown our humanity to stay alive? Next, we're tossed onto a Greek island where death itself walks the shoreline in a tunic of storm cloud gray. Number 5, Isle of the Dead, 1945. Set in 1912, but filmed for a world still bearing its own millions, Isle of the Dead strands General Faraday on a quarantine station that bakes beneath a rind of cicada-screaming heat. The plague here isn't just septicemic, it's supernatural. Villagers whisper of the Vrikalakas, a spirit that slips from coffin to coffin, draining breath from the living. Coffins nail shut too soon, graves gape open by morning, and wind-eroded statues appear to trade places overnight. Robson saturates every frame in sickly yellows, so vivid you feel infection creeping under your own nails, while Karloff's gaunt stare turns rational doubt into crumbling dread. Contemporary critics argued whether the monster ever appears. Audiences knew better when Karloff's lantern trembled beside a tomb lid lifting from within. For war-weary 1945 crowds, the plague was more than period detail. It was fascism, grief, and survivors' guilt given rotten flesh. The final tableau, a storm devouring the island as a single rowboat flees toward night, left theaters in stunned silence. And somewhere beyond that darkness lies a lagoon where prehistoric roars shake the moonlit surf. Number 6, Strange Cargo, 1940. Imagine a French penal hulk straining along the equator, its lower decks rank with chained bodies, salt-swollen timber, and hymns muttered by men already half in the grave. In Frank Borzage's merciless parable, the ocean is both prison and judge. It hears every whispered escape plot, erases footprints with one wave, and writes its verdict in thunder. Clark Gable's hard-boiled fugitive Verne teams with Joan Crawford's weary torch singer Julie, bartering stolen keys and hope for a place on a lifeboat. Yet the real stowaway is Cambreau, a serene stranger who seems to see the weight in every sinner's heart. One convict drinks brackish water, laughing at salvation, and dies tasting his own bitterness. Another mocks mercy and is dragged under by currents that feel positively sentient. Wartime spectators staggered from cinemas, wondering if Borzage had dared to smuggle Christ himself onto Hollywood's blacklist. When a typhoon peels their patchwork raft apart and leaves Verne staring straight into Cambreau's unblinking calm, audiences felt the sea refuse to surrender its captives. And if redemption can lurk beneath rusted iron, what nightmare waits on an island where science masquerades as God? Number 7, The Mad Doctor of Market Street, 1942. The cruise liner Arctic Queen erupts into flame, pitching renegade biologist Ralph Benson, Lionel Atwill in predatory glory, and a clutch of socialites into a lifeboat already leaking hope. They grope ashore on a Polynesian isle that smells of gardenia and grave dirt, ruled by a chieftain convinced the border between life and death can be bought with ritual. Benson pounces. Faking the revival of a drowned boy, he recasts himself as God of Science, trading miracles for souls. Soon the castaways stand shackled beneath jungle canopies, drums echoing both heartbeat and countdown, while makeshift labs glow with coconut oil lamps. Joseph H. Lewis frames foliage like a living cage. Sun-slashed leaves hide bone altars, and every breeze carries the charred scent of hubris. When Benson meets his real boundary in a volcano's red throat, 1942 audiences felt their own faith in progress shiver. The blast that seals his fate spat cinders over everyone watching, warning that genius minus conscience will always torch paradise. Perhaps someone, somewhere beyond that furious orange horizon, is already trying the same trick on a zombie-ridden sugar island. Number 8. I Walked with a Zombie, 1943. Jacques Tourneur's fever dream opens with Nurse Betsy Connell alone at a ship's rail, constellations drowning in humid mist as she sails toward St. Sebastian, a plantation so sick its cane fields whisper like patients on morphine. Her charge, Jessica Holland, glides through moonlit corridors in a trance borrowed from the ocean itself. Luton and Tourneur refuse jump scares. Dread seeps instead from swinging lanterns, wind-gnawed slave relics, and the boom of voodoo drums. A ritual path through the cane becomes the longest hallway in horror. Every rustle could be Baron Samedi's hoof or just your pulse. When towering Carrefour steps out, skin bleached like driftwood, eyes fossil blank, cinemas fall silent. He doesn't lunge. He only watches, judging the living like an eternal tide. By dawn, Betsy sees St. Sebastian itself is cursed. Colonial guilt, unburied grief, and tropical fever fused into one slow doom. Lover's flight ends under a windmill where a blade draws a sword of moonlight straight through fate. Viewers left, believing the ocean never separates the damned from the saved. It simply ferries contagion from shore to shore. Next port of call, a Cornish mansion perched on cliffs that bite back. Number 9. The Uninvited, 1944. Hoping sea air will heal old wounds, London siblings Roderick and Pamela buy a clifftop mansion that squats above jagged Cornish rocks like a gull poised to dive. Fires roar, yet breath blooms in every room. A woman's lullaby sobs up the staircase each midnight until it sharpens into accusation. Lewis Allen photographs candle flames like prisoners, their quivers matching actress Gail Russell's nerves. A séance reveals two spirits, one pleading, one enraged, both born of maritime tragedy. The chandelier swings like a compass, searching for safe harbor. When a portrait is hurled down the stairs, wartime audiences heard their own sons' sea-bound fates crashing too. Dawn brings spectral footprints across wet sand, advancing toward pewter surf that seems to sew the dead back into its skin. Civilized horror, critics sniffed, but viewers felt primitive terror when the benign ghost finally speaks through a barking dog, naming a murderer in a voice like wind over wreckage. The exorcism frees house and airs, yet the last shot lingers on that blank horizon, daring the next vessel to sail into its waiting fog. Number 10. Fog Island, 1945. A train whistle fades into gull cries as ex-convict Leo Grainer pilots a battered launch toward the island that ruined him. Fog snarls around dead pines. His decaying mansion squats like a stranded leviathan. Grainer lures the business partners who framed him with talk of buried fortune, but each receives a clue that doubles as a death warrant. Terry O. Morse bathes corridors in mist thick enough to taste. Chandelier crystals catch lantern light like drowned diamonds. Inside the walls ticks a tidal clock, counting down until the causeway vanishes under black water, sealing everyone in. Suspicion metastasizes. Portraits breathe, poisoned darts whistle, and a glass floor shatters, plunging a traitor into sea caves roiling with crabs. Newsreel jaded audiences cheered the poetic justice until Grainer discovered vengeance is a maze with no exit. Thunder cracks, the mansion collapses into surf and splintering beams, but the fog drifts outward, guilt made visible. Farther offshore, a rust-flecked freighter ferries its own secrets toward the horizon we'll chart in our final plunge. Number 11. Unknown Island, 1948. A rust-flecked tramp steamer edges out of Singapore nightclubs and into myth, carrying ex-Navy pilot Ted Osborne, his fearless fiancée Carol, and a mercenary skipper who drinks courage by the bottle. Their quarry is a speck on wartime charts whispered to crawl with beasts lost since the Cambrian dawn. Cinecolor drenches the voyage in sickly greens, gunmetal seas, jaundiced skies, and jungle vines the hue of bruised skin. When thunder squalls shred the rigging, the ship grinds onto coral that looks like fossilized bone, and we step ashore into a humidity so thick it feels carnivorous. A tyrannosaurus tears the silence with a roar that rattles cartridge belts. Later, a lumbering sloth ape drags its clubbed fists through campfire embers while the captain laughs himself past sanity. The film's stop-motion shortcomings become part of the nightmare. Reality itself seems to stutter as if the island refuses to stay in the same decade. 1948 audiences, exhausted by victory yet haunted by radioactive headlines, watched men fling grenades at thunder lizards and sensed humanity beginning a dangerous romance with extinction. When sunrise reveals a boatless horizon and the captain gone feral, you realize the biggest predator here is yesterday's trauma wearing a human face, and the next sea tale will swap dinosaurs for voodoo-bound corpses. Number 12. King of the Zombies, 1941. A transport plane hurled off course by a Caribbean storm punches through cumulonimbus like a bullet through cotton and dies hissing in jungle canopy. The survivors limp to a Baroque mansion where chandeliers drip mold, and its owner, Dr. Miklos Sangre, smiles with the calm of embalmed royalty. Radio static crackles with coded war secrets, and midnight drums answer from sugar cane thickets. Gene Yarbrough splashes screwball banter across the dread so viewers laugh, then choke on the echo when they glimpse voodoo rites in the cellar. Ranks of glassy-eyed villagers swaying to a monotone chant that feels older than seawater. Comic genius Mantan Moreland steals every scene, yet his widened eyes become the audience's when a naval officer, long presumed drowned, staggers forward, skin gray, soul hijacked. Released months before Pearl Harbor, the film rewired homefront nerves. Axis spies, colonial guilt, and resurrection lore fused into a single nightmare in evening wear. When Sangre's zombies lurch against their master and the mansion erupts in flame, we're reminded that terror can masquerade as savoir-faire until firelight reveals the stitches. And if torches on a tropical veranda unsettle you, wait until an entire schooner sails into the maw of a manta-sized devil beneath glassy South Pacific moonlight. Number 13. Devil Monster, 1946. Some legends begin with a message in a bottle. This one starts with a schooner that simply vanishes. Years later, a grief-crazed mother hires tuna fishermen to scour a Polynesian archipelago where sunsets bleed bronze and taboo reefs rise like serrated tombstones. They find her son alive, sun-browned, bare-chested, and utterly unwilling to return. S. Edwin Graham stitches 1930s adventure reels to fresh 1940s footage until time itself feels salt-eaten. Travelogue serenity mutates into horror as a manta ray the size of cathedral doors glides from abyssal ink. Harpoons strike its leather hide with the futility of toothpicks. Blood billows crimson, staining the water like accusatory ink. Stock footage of octopus versus eel death matches flickers into the narrative, blurring fact and fabrication so thoroughly that viewers leave the theater unsure which images were faked and which atrocities were documentary. In the atomic dawn of '46, crowds saw more than pulp thrills. They saw science's promise of dominion, ruptured by nature's patient vendetta. When the creature drags the ship and its sins into a whirlpool that looks carved by the devil's own fingernail, the screen cuts to black before breath returns. But treasure still glitters in wreckage, and one ruthless captain is ready to sell his soul and his crew for a single gold-heavy dive. Number 14. Wake of the Red Witch, 1948. John Wayne's Captain Rawls commands the Red Witch like a phantom driven by twin engines of grief and vengeance. He intentionally scuttles her, $5 million in bullion settling into cobalt silence, just to wound a rival shipping magnate who stole the woman both men loved. Edward Ludwig films the wreck in murky chiaroscuro. Beams crack like ribs, bubbles burst like reluctant confessions, and gold bars gleam through silt like Satan's grin. Flashbacks unspool across 3 oceans, rum-sodden beach brawls, lantern-lit funerals, and a hurricane whose purple skies seem painted by Turner after a nightmare. Post-war audiences, newly fluent in sacrifice, watched Rawls strap on a diving bell for the fatal salvage run, an oxygen hose his umbilical cord to hope, and felt the crushing ache of debts no victory can erase. When the wreck shifts, pinning him under splintered timbers, the soundtrack drops to a heartbeat echo while flakes of rust swirl like dying fireflies. The treasure rises, but Rawls stays entombed, proving some haunts choose the sea instead of the afterlife. And as the last air bubble winks out, we drift to an English cliff cottage where a different sea captain prefers haunting to drowning, and love endures past flesh, past time, past tide. Number 15, The Ghost and Mrs Mure, 1947. Young widow Lucy Mure rents Gull Cottage to taste independence, but every plank reeks of brine-soaked secrets. Moonlight slants through salt-rimmed windows onto the portrait of Captain Daniel Gregg, drowned, they say, when a gale dashed his schooner against Devil's Teeth rocks. Bernard Herrmann's score sighs like distant surf as Lucy confronts the spectral skipper. Rex Harrison materializes in pipe smoke, eyes the color of storm glass, voice half thunder, half lullaby. Theirs becomes a romance without touch, yet deeper than flesh. He dictates his memoir, blood and swash, through her hand. She teaches him tenderness in return. But the sea is jealous. Waves batter the cliffs each night as if trying to reclaim its ghost, and Herrmann's strings slide into minor keys that ache of longing centuries deep. 1947 audiences, nursing post-war absence, wept when Lucy aged beside an empty hearth, while Gregg watched, unable to speak. In the final scene, her heart stills, and she rises young again, his hand in hers as they walk out into a dawn painted silver by the sea. Viewers left believing eternity might be nothing more than love riding the tides. Proof that the scariest stories aren't about dying, but about who will wait on the other shore. From rusted hulls to moonlit cliffs, these forgotten voyages prove terror isn't confined to depth. It lives in the choices we carry ashore. If their surf-soaked whispers hooked you, dive deeper, like, subscribe, and ring the bell so our next haunted tide of cinema secrets finds you first again very soon.